Hello, I'm Ben Macintyre, the author of A Spy Among Friends, and you're watching Book Zone.
Please join me to welcome Ben Macintyre.
The Kim Philby story is usually told as a tale of politics and ideology. The story I propose to tell you tonight is rather different. It's a story of male friendship and Englishness.
Ben, thanks for joining me. Kim Philby, who was he and what was his great betrayal?
Well, Kim Philby is still, I think, the most notorious spy of the 20th century. I mean, he did what no other spy has really ever done, which is that he got himself into the enemy intelligence camp and reported from the inside. That's really what he did. I mean, he was a Soviet agent who got into the heart of British intelligence. That's just a very small description of what he was, because Philby's an immensely complicated character in lots of ways. He was a fanatic in some ways. I mean, he was an absolutely hell-bent, devoted communist. Hundreds of people, perhaps even thousands of people, died as a result of his betrayals. And yet he had a kind of gift for intimacy that was really very remarkable. He was a remarkably charming man. I mean, he'd walk into the room and people would think the lights had suddenly gone on. I mean, he had a kind of real sort of way of drawing people in, and that, of course, made him an incredibly effective spy. Burgess and Maclean were very effective in their ways, but they were in the Foreign Office. They weren't in British intelligence, the heart of the beast. So my two protagonists are Kim Philby and his closest friend, Nicholas Elliot. And the Elliot family was incredibly generous with their files and their photographs and their memos and so on. So I've been able to tell the story through a different perspective, really, which is really through the prism of this one defining friendship.
Now, you had access to MI5 files while writing this book. So what did you discover that we didn't know before?
Well, there are two different areas here that one needs to be pretty clear about. MI5, the security service, the people who are responsible for defending Britain effectively. Now, their files are gradually being released, and all of the Philby files will eventually be released. MI6, the external intelligence operations, the secret intelligence service, I strongly suspect they will never release their files. Not just because this is a particularly embarrassing period for them, but also because on principle they don't. Now, when news of this offer landed back in London, it landed on the desk of Kim Philby, who by this point was head of anti-Soviet operations for Section 5. So a very important job. He was effectively trying to combat people like himself.
Do you think that he was allowed to defect because the government and the spy agencies didn't want a trial?
There's good evidence that when Philby was finally confronted in 1963 by his old friend Nicholas Elliot, that rather than somehow magically managing to get away, which was the way that he always portrayed it thereafter, he made it look as if his defection to the Soviet Union had been a sort of last act of brilliant skullduggery by a master spy. It looks more likely from the evidence that in fact the door to Moscow was simply left open. Philby knew that the axe was going to fall, and he knew that if anyone was going to be wielding it, it was likely to be Nicholas Elliot. Now, the reasons that MI6 might have wanted to do that are pretty clear. I mean, they did not want a trial back in London. The last thing they wanted was Kim Philby on a witness stand spilling the beans about what he'd been doing for 30 years, or not doing. I mean, it would have been cripplingly embarrassing.
So today, Russia and the West are at odds over Ukraine. Is this a return to the Cold War, or did it never, ever go away?
The stakes are different. I mean, the looming threat of sort of global war that occurred during the Cold War, that sort of hung over the whole conversation and hangs out throughout this conversation, throughout this book, doesn't really exist today. We are no longer two superpowers crashing it out. But yes, I mean, in certain elements, we slip back very easily into the language of spies, and I'd be stunned if there isn't a spy battle going on at this moment in Ukraine. And that's the story of Kim Philby and Nicholas Elliot. Thank you.